everyone. I'm Ken Getner. Welcome to The Last Battlefield. I made this show because I want to interview veterans so the rest of the country understands what we go through all the time, every day, simply for being veterans. We hear it in the news about veteran suicides and PTSD and all of the depression that seems to be plaguing our country in our modern era. And I just want to talk about it. I want to have a conversation that normalizes understanding what veterans are going through every day. So, my first guest is an old friend of mine who's gone through the ringer and come out in the end, and he's doing something great with his life. His name is Eric, and I'm going to introduce him to you right now. So, enjoy.
Hello, my name is Eric Asselford. I was a staff sergeant in the United States Air Force for 13 years as a security policeman, which, as we all know, is now security forces, as well as being a canine handler. To be honest, I had fairly cushy assignments. I was at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, New Hampshire, Myrtle Beach, and Oklahoma. I've had temporary duty assignments in Panama for Operation Just Cause, and Prince Sultan Air Base, Saudi Arabia, for Operations Desert Fox and Southern Watch. Thankfully, I was never involved in direct hostilities. The most challenging thing about transitioning to civilian life was having to work alongside and supervise people. The military does not train you how to supervise civilians. There's a safety net in the military, in fact, that everyone has to do what they're told. Yeah, it's great if you can ask nicely and they do it, but if they don't, there's a punishment that goes along with it. Not so in civilian life. It was absolutely crippling. After a very long and challenging path that included a diagnosis of a major depressive disorder, substance use, and failed relationships, I ended up going to grad school to become a clinical psychologist. I like working with adults with strong personalities, like veterans. I tend to focus less on past issues and concentrate on moving forward and gaining momentum. I try to create a series of small successes that hopefully will generate an addiction of success and pull people out of their mood. I think the thing I missed most about the military was the camaraderie of hanging out, talking and joking with a large cast of characters. Through all the Type A personality bravado, there was a kind of a shared sense of vulnerability with everyone. To an outsider, it certainly seemed as though we were a bunch of undisciplined roustabouts, but the cohesion really kept everyone sane. I sorely miss that. This is my journey.
Joining me now is Eric Asselford. Now, Eric, the audience just heard your monologue about your life and what you've been doing, what you did in the military and what you did after the military. But I just want to be completely transparent here for my viewers. Eric and I go back quite a few decades. Now, I met you at toward the start of my military career. I did re-enlist, and you were there for it. It was my first
Yeah,
enlistment, but it was at the end of your career.
yeah,
So
towards the end of it, yeah.
yeah. Now we deployed together, and we kind of became part of a notorious band of rabble. Any
Put it very politely, yes.
yes, any memories you'd like to share?
Oh Lord. Well, certainly the phrase "the best of times, the worst of times" comes to mind.
Yeah.
Certainly, deploying, as everybody knows, is very taxing. Whether it's just for a few days across the country, or whether it's 90 days across the world. But no, it was certainly as difficult as the deployment was geographically and whatnot. Certainly, the friendships that were formed out of necessity. You force a bunch of people to a difficult situation like that. You're gonna find refuge. You're gonna find strength and support in the people you deploy with, and from other teams too. So
Right.
certainly, friendships that were built over there have remained. What are we looking at now, 20 plus years later? So
Be
um,
20 it'll be 24 years this I think this November.
yeah, so rarely as human beings do we get a gift like that we get to be forced into a situation where we create new friends that have that strong of a bond. So
Yeah.
I think certainly the biggest thing, and something I miss in general with military as a whole, not specifically germane to Saudi Arabia, but just the conversations that you have, whether it's in a large group of people or at 2 in the morning, you pull up on someone's post, you just sit there and just chew the fat for a while.
Right.
Certainly to the casual observer, it does not look like productive conversation. It's certainly pretty pretty blue, very graphic. But there's a lot of what's great about it is there's a shared vulnerability. The language may not be what people would approve of, but being able to sit one on one with someone, and if you decipher through all the cussing and the innuendo and things like that, there's a lot of honesty and vulnerability that we don't always get to share in our everyday life, even necessarily with our spouses. I think a lot of times the intimacy of a relationship between two people on a deployment, two people in a wartime situation, or whichever, is very honest, very raw, and quite cathartic too. Just being able to release. You say there's so much that is said without being said, and I think that's one of the things I miss quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think being there, I've been in some really bad places as an Iraq War veteran, and uh, I did a combat patrol and going out there and just seeing some of the stuff we've seen, and then I've been on some really great deployments, and I've been in some really great locations. And one of the things I've noticed is that it's not so much the place that makes it good or bad; it's the people you're with that
Oh,
makes something good.
absolutely.
Having a good job is great, but if you work with some really negative people that just bring you down, it brings out the worst in you. And I think with what we were doing, and it was we worked 12-hour shifts. We were always out there. We were out there at midnight all the way up until noon. But afterwards, we would get together and we would spend a few hours together every single day, just chewing the fat, as you said, and just talking about things and just having fun and it shared interest and just enjoying each other's company, and that's what made it worthwhile.
Yeah.
So it just every time I think about it, and we still talk to some of the other guys on the that were on the team with us or that were on other teams that we just came to know. So it was just really great, and I just appreciate those days that it made it a better experience because we all recognized that we were there for the same thing, but we also had that, as you said, shared vulnerability too, and we shared with each other. We were, you know, we were away from our families. We were thrown together. We didn't really know each other very well, and we just made the best of
Right.
it. So
Yeah,
now,
that daily debrief, for lack of a better term, I think that's probably what the technical term would be. That daily debrief in a stressful situation. I think about people in civilian life that do have stressful jobs that aren't able to do that right after work. There's not that there's not that pull to be together with your coworkers
right,
so much in civilian life. It's you get to work and you get out of there and as far away from them as quickly as possible for whatever reason. I mean, they may not be the greatest people to work with or what have you, but I think just in general, as a society, we don't hang around our coworkers. And I think the pervasive thought is, I work with these people 40 hours a week. The last thing I want to do is see them, an additional 3 or 4 hours or at a party. Just getting people together for like a company office party is like pulling teeth sometimes. So I think that's something that is definitely missed. And I think if more people could allow themselves to be vulnerable, quote unquote, with their coworkers, I think they would have a completely different outlook on it.
I agree. I agree with that. I think that we've moved into that kind of world where people don't want to I don't want them to see me and how I am outside of work because they might see something they don't like, or I might say something that could land me in HR or something like that. And it's just a sad state of our society now versus what we were used to, at least on that deployment. And
Yeah,
um
and there's definitely conversations, longer conversations for other podcasts. Or we have a template that we put on, and that's the template we want people to see. And if we don't have that template, we feel exposed, and thus we don't want to share those private things.
right.
It's you're opening up a possible raw nerve that could be people feel they may be exploited later, what have you.
Yeah.
Again, much longer psychological conversation for later on.
And I've got the right guest for that. So Eric, shortly after we got back, I got orders within 10 or 11 months, and I was gone. I left our base. We were stationed
Yeah,
together at Tinker, and I went overseas. I went to Korea, and we fell out. We fell out of touch with each other because this is before the days of social media
yeah.
and modern technology that allows people like us to connect. But what did you do after you left the Air Force? Because I think you got out in '99, right?
I got out in '99. I was in 13 years. I was in security police and switched over to security forces.
Right.
And I was not having a good time anymore. I didn't enjoy it. The Air Force is making a lot of changes away from law enforcement into security, which is not what I wanted to do ultimately. So I got out and I immediately, well, before I even got out, I landed a job with a very, very large private security firm in Oklahoma City. Definitely up on the ladder, status wise, a lot of responsibility. And so I was quite happy. I'm like, hey, look at me. I've got I made a successful transition, even though I hadn't even turned my ID card in yet, and I was ready to go. And wow, was that an eye opener? Um, Pretty much completely ruined my life inside of a year. It was so horrible. The military does not train you to supervise civilians. They just don't. There's a in the military, at least with, and I can really only speak to security police and security forces. There's always a safety net. We probably issue harsher orders or more stern orders. Um, and we do that just routinely. It's great if you can make the order directive come across as being friendly and say, "Hey, Dave, can you go man post gate 29 for a few hours?" And if you make it seem nice, fine. They say, "Yeah, sure, sir, not so no problem. I'll go do it." That's great. But if they're reluctant to do it, you just say, "Airman, you're going to go do that now," and that's all there is to it. You're going to get the same result whether you're nice or whether you're firm or anything like that. So there's always that safety net. There's never a need to negotiate. There's never a need to have a quid pro quo or anything like that. So when I got into a security firm, which I'd assume would be a little militaristic, being in security, things like that, the idea that somebody would just not show up to work was completely foreign to me. The fact that somebody would show up and not have their shirts ironed or anything like that was I was literally in a foreign land and didn't speak the language. Um,
Right.
I remember very early on, somebody had messed up and done something, so I was going to just give them a regular, stern lecture, just in proper military format. And he got up and he just walked out. I'm like, it was not equipped to handle that. Um, so it's not like I was in charge of just a few people like in the military. And this was a 70-person security firm. So just the type of employee that they had and were able to hire for that wage and that education level, it was very difficult to manage that with my type A personality mindset. And then just things started to unravel. I remember one Saturday, it was a gorgeous Saturday, and I was going to go out and enjoy some family time. And I got 27 phone calls on a Saturday, all related for just personnel BS. I mean, just for lack of a better term, just people calling off. One guy had called and said, "Oh, my wife's been missing me for I've been working a lot, so I'm gonna take today off and go do whatever." And it's like, wow, and it was just I spent more time looking at my phone going, what?
How is that even happening? Yeah.
Yes. So, and I accept full responsibility for it. I don't want to say for a second that, well, it's someone else's fault. But I think civilians, when they hire military people, they're under the impression that they can just fit anywhere, do anything. And yes, we can show up on time and do exactly what we're told right to the letter, but there's a lot of other things, some of that just because we come with an entire different moral structure and set of priorities and a million different ways to describe it. We just don't have some of those softer skills, I think. And like I said, I'm kind of probably speaking strictly to security police, but that's what I was dealing with. And it created a situation of just massive depression. I just felt like my entire life was collapsing. I couldn't even go out and enjoy dinner um, without getting phone calls. I remember during the Super Bowl, I said, you know what? I'm shutting the phone off. And I shut the phone off for 4 hours. And so finally, after the game, I turned it back on, and it was just I lost track of the messages. It was just absolutely bizarre.
Wow.
So that became the beginning of the first trip to rock bottom, I guess I should say.
Oh, wow. So speaking of that rock bottom, did you actually hit rock bottom, as some people call it?
Oh, several times. I'm quite comfortable down there because it doesn't just happen once. But the first time, it's certainly the most prevalent time. Yeah, like I said, I completely lost everything. End up moving back here to Vermont and then living with my brother, and not super gainfully employed. I certainly had some plans to move forward to state police and things like that, which was a natural thing. But there was so much unresolved emotional stuff that I just kind of hit a wall. And I think initially I was working in a department store unloading trucks, which was perfect because I could lift really super heavy things for long periods of time and I kept my mouth shut. So that basic criteria made me a model employee. I don't know how many times I got employee of the month just because I kept my mouth shut, I did what I was told. But then things really started to get bad. Again, being a type A personality, I freely call myself that. I still am to this day. You don't recognize when you're in the moment, and so I started gaining weight, and I stopped going to the gym and stopped doing this, and this went on for a couple years. I won't lie to you, about 2 years, and it finally got to the point where boy, this isn't cutting it. So you start drinking and you start drinking like, wow, I'm really full of alcohol right now. I couldn't possibly have another glass of wine or another beer. I'm going to start mixing some pills with it. So certainly prescription drugs. I never became addicted, but I did heavily use, mix the two together. And then when I was out of prescription drugs, I turned to my antidepressants and things like that, just to do anything. I finally did get to the point where I said, okay, today's the day, and I just started shoveling pills and drinking and shoveling pills and drinking, and I ended up going to the hospital. And so I did end up. I had a great VA counselor who worked with some of the counselors at the hospital here locally where I'm at, and so I went to the hospital down at White River Junction in Vermont, and was not happy there. There's a lot of really sick people there, um, but I was just so heavily depressed that it was miserable, and I was scared, and I was in new territory, and I didn't have control, and I didn't all these things that I felt I didn't have. Um, so after I got out, and as great as my therapist was, therapy is only as good as the patient. So being being a reluctant and tough nut to crack wasn't making a whole lot of headway. Certainly lying to him, lying to myself. That's what we do in therapy. We lie, and so eventually he said, "Well, you know what? Let's switch to group therapy. Maybe that might be a good thing." And thank God for group therapy, not because it was therapeutic in any way, shape, or form, but it gave me the absolute gift of being on rock bottom and seeing where I didn't want to go because it was a group. I was the youngest one in there. I was 30, 33, 34, maybe uh, youngest by like 20 years. And and God bless these old geezers. They were in their late 50s, early 60s. Some of them had just done like a 2 year tour in Vietnam. And not to discount that, I'm sure it was absolutely just horrific. And some of the things I might have seen, but they've been in group therapy for years and years and years, and in group therapy and individual therapy and things like that. And if you need that, that's great. But I looked at that, I went to 2 sessions and I said, that's not what I want.
Mm.
Sometimes it's very difficult to us articulate what we do want. Um, but in lieu of that, if you can figure out what you don't want in life, that can be just as beneficial. And I knew I did not want to be sick. And
Some
as
some of the best leaders I've I'm sorry, some of the best leadership lessons I ever received when I was serving was when I had bad leaders, and I said I don't want to be like that. So that
Yes.
was,
Yeah.
tell me about your decision. So you hit rock bottom. You had been going to you'd been going to meetings. You'd been abusing substances. Um, how did you pull yourself out of that? Was it because of the therapy, or what was there something else?
It was, I think what it was, and I don't mean to make light or make it seem like, oh, you just do this. I made a conscious decision right then and there that I just did not want to be sick anymore. And I was no longer going to tolerate certain behaviors from myself. And it was really just a matter of making that neurocognitive shift, which again, easier said than done. I'm certainly not going to be so arrogant to say, "Oh, just think this," and everything's going to get better. But just for me individually, I got disgusted with myself, and right from that second, my partner was pregnant at the time, and there was a baby on the way, and I said, I am no longer going to mix drugs and alcohol. I'm going to start pulling myself out of this and moving forward. So certainly, the birth of my daughter was a big thing that helped me make that push. And I started going back to school, got a regular full-time job with benefits and health care in a school system where there's younger kids. I do really great with young kids. I actually started out in a preschool, which is a great story for later. It's a fun story, and I did really really well there, and I just ended up doing better with an elementary level set of kids because I'm a big guy. I'm NFL size. I take up a lot of real estate, but I'm also a very gentle person too. So I'm a bit of an anomaly to a lot of these kids, and they didn't all have a father figure. So I know definitely some of the kids I worked with, I was the only real positive role model in their life. So I think there was a sense of internally, okay, I'm getting better, but I'm also giving back in some way, shape, or form. It may not be, volunteer, whatever it is, but I'm giving back to something, someone, somewhere.
Hmm.
That shifts your priorities. It takes less of the focus off of poor me, and you go, oh my God, how can I help these poor other people doing something?
So it
Um,
gave you a cause.
it really did give me a mission. Part of the language I try and use as a former vet and working with type A personalities particularly is changing some of the soft vocabulary and turning into more concrete, relatable vocabulary. So yeah, it's great to have a cause. Better to have a mission if you're very gung ho or as we call it here in my house, Neanderthal like.
Well, I'm up against a break right now, so I'm going to take a break. And when we come back, I'm going to continue on talking with Eric Asselford about when he's decided to pursue a career in psychology. So we'll be right back in just a moment. All right, so we're back, and when we were we were talking about rock bottom and Eric hitting it and starting his life anew, working in education. But I'm really curious because I really don't know this. Tell me about your decision to study and pursue a career in psychology. I mean, what drew you to it?
So that's a cute story too. All my stories are cute. So I was working in an elementary school and doing really really well finally, and getting comfortable, and decided to go back to school. And it just seemed natural while I'm working in elementary school, so I'll pursue a degree in elementary education because they're always screaming for males in the younger grades.
Really, I would not have imagined that.
Yeah, very much so. Turns out they don't necessarily want my type of male, but they they want guys in a cookie cutter shape.
Oh,
Whole nother
oh,
story. Whole nother story.
okay.
So but anyway, on a serious note, so yeah, I went back to school and the went to college here locally. It has a really good teaching program, and right about that time, online education started to kind of blossom a little bit. As you probably well know, when it first started out, it was very looked down upon if you were taking online classes. But thank God the local college had the foresight to realize what an absolute boon this was going to be. My doctorate is all done online through Cal Southern. Um, so I was able to do that and attend regular classes on the weekends. And it was difficult taking 3 classes at a time, working full time, being a dad full time.
Mm.
But that was part of that drive I knew I need to have in order to succeed. I couldn't just do this part time if I wanted to provide for my family and be the type of person that I knew I could be. So it was a grind. It was difficult being up at 2 in the morning doing homework and things like that.
But
Um,
but the juice was worth the squeeze.
it was, yes, that should be on a T-shirt. So it got time to do my student teaching, and I had a very successful student teaching. But I was also a double major too, elementary ed and psychology, and I was always getting my psychology homework done first. And I was always, sitting in meetings, and there just felt like a disconnect between education and psychology and its applicability to classroom settings and dealing with parents. And I didn't have the knowledge to articulate exactly what that was. And it just felt a little off. So it got towards, I think I started my second phase of student teaching. And like I said, I had a very successful student teaching assignments. But I was like, something does not feel right. And it just really started to burn and burn. I'm like, this may not be the right decision. At first I thought, well, I'm just nervous, but it really gnawed at me. And since I again having a double major with psychology and getting that homework done first, I applied to a few different grad schools. Which, if you'd seen my high school grades, you know, it would have been an absolute pipe dream that was ever going to happen. But lo and behold, I got into one of the better ones here in Vermont, and I decided to pursue that. So it was really kind of, I half jokingly say I dodged a bullet
Mm.
because I don't think I would be able to survive the teaching as it has evolved into 2022. So this is back in 2005, I think I started.
Mm.
2005, 2006. So I would not have survived a classroom as how it's set up in the current educational theorem that's prevalent nowadays. But definitely psychology did fit for me. And certainly, and I was glad to see that there was room for someone with my type of personality, my type of approach. It definitely goes against the grain of 90% of therapists out there. And I tell people, I am not for everybody. You can come to me, and there's people that absolutely loved me. And there are people that said, I don't want to talk to Eric ever again. I don't even want to see him. And that's okay. Because there is a right therapist out there for everybody.
But your kind of therapy probably is what some of our veterans, for example, need versus, I don't know how else to put it, sunshine and daffodils versus your in your face style. I'm assuming you're a little bit more in your face, and because I know Eric Asselford, so
Yeah, yeah. In your face might be a little tough, a little more hyperbolic, but I think definitely not being afraid to confront people. And you certainly, and we'll get into this later, you certainly do not have to have a past veteran as a therapist. It helps because when I talk to people, even if it's not within a therapeutic setting, if it's just a veteran I happen to whatever, and I say, so how are things going on? And the veteran says, oh, you know how it is. And I do. And just that one phrase, being able to say to another person, you know how it is, and that person going, yeah, it fills in a million blank spaces, things you don't have to answer. You don't have to talk about acronyms. You don't have to talk about rank structure. You don't have to talk about a wide range of things.
right.
So certainly being able to connect on that level, I speak first responders. So I work great with police officers, firemen, ambulance crews, border patrol, being able to communicate on that language. And when they say things to me, I'm not going to freak out about it.
So it sounds like you found your niche, really. I mean, that's. Did you feel like was there like an awakening where you're like, I feel like I have a natural acumen. I have a natural, like some people have a natural draw toward mathematics, or they have, mechanics or something. Did you feel that when you were in your studies and when you were doing clinicals?
I honestly didn't, other than it was something I knew I could do, but also I knew it was a place I could really be myself. The person you see in the office is very much the same person give or take, that you'd see in person. Speaking to me in a bar, at a bar stool over a beer is going to be very much like sitting with me in a therapy session. I feel, I'm approachable. I use common language, and I have shared experiences. So especially in dealing with first responders, it's a huge thing. There's a whole other language that we speak, a whole other tone, and again, a lot of it is what's not being said that you can just kind of assume is all right. I know there are a lot of first responders who've spoken to a more traditional approach therapist, and the therapist loses their mind. Um, because I'll hear something and I can process that in that language and understand what it means. It doesn't necessarily mean. There was one patient in particular I talked to, where we discussed something negative. He would say, "Oh, that was like the best day of my life." And so, very opposite meanings here. I knew it to mean sarcastic, but another therapist looked like that. Like, oh, I'm getting a lot of conflicting answers. I don't really understand what's going on. So it's definitely helpful to be able to speak on that broad of a topic, being they call it being culturally can't remember the word for it.
Someone
Not
with real
culturally
life
encapsulated with.
someone with real life experience who can relate to and has uses sarcasm or dark humor versus someone who went from high school to college to grad school to pursuing
Yes,
their PhD.
cross cultural is the
Right.
term I'm looking for. So
Cross cultural. Right.
yeah.
So you had we were talking earlier about how you left the military, you had your struggles, you were you were hitting rock bottom, and when you got into studying psychology, was there anything in the studies that revealed something about yourself?
Not not really, and that's not to be a smart aleck or anything like that. They say your first day of shrink school, they say people go into this field, and they're usually triggered by something, or they find out something deep about themselves. And I never really got to that point, other than I was kind of reflecting on it, and I think now, instead of being so reactionary on a lot of things, just because of the breadth of education I've had and the breadth of exposure to different people, is understanding not just where they're coming from, but why that is happening on just not only psychological level, but also a physiological level too. Is what has their life experiences led to brain development and why they're reacting this way, especially with regard to trauma and things like that. So there's a lot that happens within the body, within the brain, that has long-term effects. And this goes from 6-year-olds that might be misbehaving to my mother, who ended up having memory issues and things like that, and exhibiting behaviors that really caused my brothers, my siblings to, like, oh my God, what's going on here? Being able to explain that on a medical level, I think that's probably the best thing. I guess some people might disagree with me, but I'm definitely more open-minded to a wider range of experiences, and not be able to explain it and understand it on a physical level.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm just gonna
Okay.
enjoy it.
So, we were one of the things that as veterans we always see. You'll see it on social media, or you'll hear about something. You'll hear about a suicide. We are middle-aged men who have left our military days behind us, and yet still there are veterans still struggling and still reliving their military days. So they've got PTSD, and I don't fully understand all of that. But
Yeah.
on average, 22 veterans in America commit suicide every day. Now, from your studies and experience, what are some of the main drivers for this? Because I really want to know, because just a few weeks ago, someone I was stationed with in Germany committed suicide. There have been, I think, four of the people that I was stationed with overseas have committed suicide, and I'm hearing about this, and sometimes I'm not hearing about it for a couple of years. But what are some of the main drivers of this?
I wish I had a singular answer for that, because it's just not. And when I went to do my graduate research, one of the things I did is I tried to take a deeper dive into our culture and what's promoting that. And obviously, there's a culture that we see at the present for our modern military. Some of the things I've uncovered, and I definitely want to stress, this is simply theory, conjecture, and a somewhat different look at it. But if we look back at all the way back to Alexander the Great, and we started talking about something called the warrior ethos. Alexander the Great, brilliant general, controlled almost half the globe at a very young age. But there's at one point he was, I believe, storming across southern India or someplace like that, and things weren't going well, and there started to be a mutiny. And you have thousands and thousands of troops ready to rise up and kill you. You got to think of something pretty quick. And one of the things that Alexander the Great did is he stood up, he got everybody's attention, he takes his shirt off, and he says, "Look, my brothers, all my wounds, or all the stab wounds fighting the enemy is in the front. I have not turned and run. There are no marks on my back. I'm fighting with you, and if I can do it, you can do it." And that just automatically got the troops like, "Oh yeah, he's fighting for us," and he was able to have a successful military career. That one phrase, "If you can do it, I can do it," really is something kind of permeated throughout the rest of the 3,000 plus years since. Sparta, we often look at Sparta as the great warriors. They didn't do us any favors, believe me. One of their things was it's better to be carried back on your shield than to fail in battle. So it's that you need to do this or you're going to die thing. So that single warrior ethos has just stayed with us the entire time. It's that competition in basic places such as basic training, just running a little faster than somebody else, doing a couple more push-ups, studying a little hard for promotion, just that continual healthy one-upmanship. It's kind of in question now how healthy it is. I get it. I'm not trying to dispute it. I fell victim to it as well. But just that constant, okay, if he can do it, why am I not doing it? And as soon as you get that, why am I not doing it? That's part of the cultural aspect. Another cultural aspect, and I may catch some flack for this, but I'm putting it squarely on the heads of non-commissioned officers. There is still an incredible stigma about going to seek mental health help in the military. There's fear of repercussions, fear of affecting promotions, the whole nine yards. And the reason I'm putting it squarely on the heads of non-commissioned officers, and I'm prime suspect number one, I engaged in this, is the way we talk about mental health. When somebody was having a mental health crisis, what did we say? Oh, he's in the rubber gun club. Oh, he can't hack it. Oh, he's doing law enforcement.
He's law enforcement. Yeah.
Yes.
He's
These are conversations.
Lazies and crazies.
Yes. Those are conversations that NCOs are having in front of airmen. So if you have a two-striper that's having difficulty, is he now going to go to the hospital to seek mental health help when Sergeant Gettner or Sergeant Asselford is going to think he's going to be on goon platoon or whatever? So right. I hold middle management NCOs who are supposed to be the staunch defenders of the enlisted. We're not having appropriate conversations, or we shouldn't have those conversations in the first place, but those conversations are being overheard by airmen, sailors, Marines of lower rank. So then you no longer have a place to turn to, because this is how my supervisor, my boss, who's supposed to be my friend and defends me, is going to think of me.
One of the things that they always told us when you did not feel fit for duty is that you should go to sick call. You know how many times I went to sick call my entire military career, Eric? 0.
Yeah.
I'm a retired master sergeant, and I did not go to sick call because there is a stigma of, if you go to, you're hurting mission readiness. You're destroying our ability to man the gates and post out and meet the mission requirements, and the mission support group commander and the base commander and the squadron commander are just going to have everyone's heads because we can't meet our mission requirements. So I was sick. What ended my career was a disease called ulcerative colitis, and I was having to put on the full battle rattle and the body armor and everything, and I was going out to work, and my wife was asking me, "Why are you doing this? You're sick. You can't do your job." And I said, because the mission. And I think that might have a lot to do with what still haunts us later as veterans, is that the mission we have to provide. We can't be weak. We have to continue. And it's it's the paradigm has to shift, and I think it is. But would you agree that the paradigm is shifting, but just not fast enough?
I don't know. It's kind of hard for veterans who have been out for any length of time because I do not know what the current mindset is, but certainly as of 20 years ago, that was the thought. And when you start looking at people our age that are now struggling with suicidal issues, that's still their mindset. I'm hoping it has shifted. I would probably at some point, if I get the time to do some extra research, get into a modern military outfit and ask some questions and find out. From what I've read and what I've talked to as far as the National Guard folks that I've had contact with, it is not changing. Um, there's another interesting little piece to add on to this, especially getting out of the military and things like that. I had a TAC officer that he was a former Air Force, and he was in missile launch, so he launched ICBMs, and he did his time, did his 5 years, got out, and was I think he was a teacher, so he's waiting for a teaching position to open up. So while he's waiting, he got a job at a supermarket just to get a little bit of, keep busy, make some money while he's waiting and things like that. And he said one day he was in produce and he needed to stack some rutabagas. It's the round, greasy, waxy thing. And he was trying to stack them. They kept falling. And he kept putting up and they kept falling. He could not make it work. And he said he stopped. He's like, I had the ability to destroy the planet 6 months ago with a intercontinental ballistic missile with a turn of a key. I could blow up the world. I have a degree, and here I am. I can't stack a bunch of effing rutabaga, and it's funny at first, and then you think, how demoralizing is that? That is your mindset now. So there's lots of little things that people just take for granted because we get built up so much. Even as an enlisted person, and we build our people up. They can do anything. They're invincible. You're strong. And when you go into the civilian world and you can't stack rutabaga, that kind of leads to this feeling of, oh my God, what am I doing? Why did I get out? I'm out of my element. And it creates a snowball effect. We could talk for hours about that. But it
You start to
really
feel like you start to feel like you're worthless and everything was a sham. And was it,
that your only
was it even real?
that your only identity was being in the military, being infantry or being aircraft mechanic or whatever. Just the
Now you're
enormous
damaged
amount of
goods. You're
yeah,
just simply
enormous amount
damaged
of
goods.
responsibility, and I can't handle the simple stuff. So now you have no identity. You can't obviously go back into civilian world to be a military person, but you can't do these other simple things either. So that's not help. I don't want to say it's not helpful, but that's the reality of it. Is that happens?
So, as someone you've seen both sides, you've been in that depression. You've been in, I keep using the phrase rock bottom, but you've been there, and now you're on the therapy side of things. What is the hardest thing for someone in our position? I'm talking like a veteran who's suffering. What is the hardest thing for them to recognize when they're in it, or that they are in it? What's the hardest thing?
It's easy enough to recognize. When you're in the shit. You know it. I mean, so it's not hard to recognize. The hardest thing is to one, ask for help or realize that you can't do it alone and you need help. And that's the thing, because a lot of people, they wait so long. They're in a situation, whether it's a rocky marriage, a bad job, whatever, and they wait so long. They don't want to ask for help. They don't want to admit that there's a problem. They don't want to admit they can't do it. And then again, it snowballs, and then you capsize. And I use the analogy of capsizing because if you're in a small boat and you capsize, you're underwater, your head hurts, you can't see, you don't know which end is up, you're upside down, you're trying to struggle, you can't see the bubbles to follow your way to the top, and you just feel completely capsized, which is a very suffocating and immobilizing experience.
Which
So
makes it even
being
harder to
able
ask for help because then you feel like you don't even know how to form the words. Like asking a blind man to describe color.
Yes, exactly. And then when you can't articulate what's wrong, it just everything just exacerbates itself over and over and over again 1,000,000 times. Uh, so that at that point where it's almost too late to ask for help, and then you have a sense of helplessness. So I think being able to recognize before you capsize that you need help and you need to ask someone that knows better than you do or can help you out of it and say, hey, look, I'm starting to sink here. Can you give me some direction? That's the biggest thing.
So I do want to come back to this. I do want to come back to this. I've got a question set aside for seeking help, but I do want to ask you personally, what does your life look like right now? And I know that's kind of a departure from what we've been talking about, but I want to
Yeah.
know, what does it look like?
I have peace finally, which is a very peace is a very big word, but I during the period where I was not gainfully employed, I had a motor route delivering the morning newspaper, which I actually didn't mind. It was quiet. I didn't have to be around anybody. I got up early. It was a daily thing, but I kind of enjoyed it. I had a very rural delivery route out in the sticks of Vermont. It was peaceful. It was autumn, and it wasn't too bad. Um, but I did this for about 4 or 5 months, I think. So it started to be November, and they started playing Christmas music on the radio 24/7, which I enjoy. Um, but this was 4 in the morning, and I remember driving along, and the Vince Gill song came on. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me. And I would hear that, and I would just say, and at the time I wasn't religious yet. I was still agnostic and hadn't converted to Catholicism. But I actually literally prayed. I said, God, just whatever, just give me peace. If I can just have some peace, I'll be happy with it. That's all I'm asking for. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for, winning the lottery or anything like that. I just wanted some effing peace. And I finally got it, and it's ironic a little bit in an absolutely wonderful way that I met my wife 5 years ago or longer. That we got married 5 years ago, um, and I already had a daughter, so it's her stepmom, and we were able to. I was finally in a spot working and whatnot, and finally having insurance and making decent money. We were able to go to Disney World, which I'd never been in my life. Certainly at a point in time was a complete pipe dream. It was never going to happen. So I was just not in the position to do that. So we were able to go, not say no to anything. Had the character dining, the passes and everything. And the second day we were at Epcot, and it was at night. And I don't know if you've ever been, but at night they do the fireworks near the big globe that's in the pond, and they just blow up the sky with fireworks. And it was really cool. And then they started playing Vince Gill, Peace on Earth. And I'm standing there, and tears are coming down my face. I just could not stop crying. I just felt so much peace in that moment. My wife looked over at me. She's like, what the heck is he doing? It's just so bizarre. But it was at that moment that, like, oh my God, I have finally been granted peace. And it was such a unique and wonderful full circle of events to go from praying with that song that my life gets better, that it ended me realizing I have the peace that I want.
It was
And
it was
and I
God's way of
just
telling you.
it definitely was. It's one of those I converted to Catholicism a few years ago, and there's certain events in my life that I go, okay, that's not just coincidence. That's providence. That's divine intervention. That's definitely one of them. Um, so to this day, I mean, and now my struggles, they're regular struggles like anybody has. I'm not worrying about these, okay, am I going to make it through the day? Am I going to not drink this entire bottle of wine? Am I not going to take, all these antidepressants? They're regular struggles, and it is so nice to have regular struggles, and it's actual genuine peace.
So I'm going to ask you to say that again. You just said it is so nice to have regular struggles.
Yes, you're going to have. There's going to be. You're not supposed to have a completely perfect life. It is not feasible. It's not practical. You don't develop as a human being if you do not have a wide range of emotions. You need to experience everything. And one of those is feeling frustration, is feeling disappointment, and things like that. And understanding that is going to happen. That's what makes us human beings. That gives us the full human experience. To not have these extreme struggles is good. And I can just look at, oh, the restaurant was closed today, which, again, very, very benign and very, very ridiculous statement. But things like that, when you are at the bottom of the pit and the restaurant isn't open, takes on a whole new meaning. You throw things, you get angry, you cuss, you kick, you do a bunch of things. So to be able to have a normal, even just like an argument with your spouse, being able to say, "Oh, okay, this is just a little thing. It'll be over with in a few minutes or whatever. We can talk about it," and not look at it like, "Oh my God, the relationship is over. This is things. Simple difficulties are not exacerbated
Hmm.
like they are when you're having a major mental health crisis."
Wow. I you know, uh, I really needed to hear that. I needed to recognize that these basic, I mean, you still have a roof over your head, you have a job, you're happily married, you have your health. These are the struggles that no one said your life was going to be perfect, but
Right.
the fact that you can have these struggles and still come out at the end of it and say, I think that that's huge, and that I think that everyone needs to know that your life will have strife, it will have struggle. Without struggle, there's no growth. There's no you don't thrive. You know, if you just sit in one place, you're never going to grow, you know. So
And you absolutely stagnate without some of the negative emotions. We are so quick to tramp down, and our kids especially, anger, boredom, some of these negative things. I mean, nobody likes to be bored, nobody likes to be angry, but we don't let them sit and marinate in it for a while. It's okay to let a kid be bored. It's okay for a kid to be angry for 15, 20 minutes. It's not going to kill them. But if you never have experienced that negative side of the human experience, you're going to be a very uninteresting, very entitled, you're not going to be a great person to be around.
which we can honestly say I think everyone can agree that there are people out there who are fully formed, developed, I wouldn't say developed, but fully formed adults that have never dealt with, adversity or, conflict, and they don't know what to do when they get put in those places. So I think that's room for growth there. They need that when they're young. So what are you
Yes.
most proud of now?
Um, People would expect the obvious answer, like, oh, you had these struggles, you came out of it. I think what I'm most proud of is one having a solid religious marriage and religious relationship with God because I never had that. It was one of those. I married a very devout Irish Catholic, and she never pushed religion or anything like that. But I went to church. I had no problem going to church, and I'd go with her, and I'd stand, I'd sit, and everything, and it was fine. It was great. I enjoyed that time, and then um, I'm going to make you let me divulge off into the story here for a little bit. But I was sitting on the couch one day. We hadn't been married yet. Of course, we didn't because she is so religious. We didn't live together before marriage. So I finally had this nice house on the lake, and it was a Sunday morning, and I was sitting there with my cup of coffee just by myself. Piper was with her mom, and I was just looking out at the lake, and it really started out with I wonder why more people in the history of the world are religious than not religious. And it literally just started out with a question. And I marinated on that for a few minutes. And then the kicker question is, what if there is a God and he's the one that made everything I'm looking at now? And it just snowballed from there. And I had a great priest that I worked with that helped me kind of reconcile the science with the religious piece because at the end of the day I'm a scientist and I need data, I need research, I need all these things, and how to reconcile that in a way that I was comfortable with and also the Catholic Church was comfortable with. So certainly, being out of the military gives me an opportunity to live up to something bigger than myself and hold myself to a higher accountability, much like the military. There's some similarities between the military and going to church, but it's definitely something I'm very happy and very proud of, especially after growing up agnostic for my entire life.
So the
Um,
structure was really gratifying because it reminded you of your military
Very
your
much so,
military
and
days.
just being part of something larger than myself and holding some allegiance to something else, I think was very big. The other thing I'm most proud of is certainly my daughter. She's great, but the biggest thing is that her stepmom and I have been able to raise a very modest, very conservative, very responsible, adventurous child in the midst of all this chaos that is happening in the world. She takes challenges. She figures things out on her own. She's very independent. She she got accepted to Syracuse University, and she had the opportunity to apply for a program where she did her very first semester overseas. And this is a kid who's never been away from home before. Um, so for her to take that adventure to go to a country where she didn't speak the language fluently, away from home, and have to navigate, this whole new culture was really impressive. She's got a set on her. She's got some big onions on her. And since then, she's been able to navigate through Germany and Luxembourg and Switzerland, and now we get a phone call maybe every couple days. Never any pictures, so we have to assume while she's out there doing that, she's having a good time and doing well. So I think that's the scariest and worst thing for a parent to have to say is when they're asked, "Hey, how's your kid doing?" and they have to answer, "Oh, well, they got in with the wrong crowd at school, and they're having a tough time, and they're experimenting." That's demoralizing, and I'm so thankful that she was able to find a set of friends, a large group of friends, that I didn't have to worry about what she was doing when she left the house.
So
Um,
it's really, Eric, it's a testament. Some people get upset if their kids don't call, but if your child can go to the other side of the planet, learn, attend college and not have to call dad all the time, that's a testament to your parenting, and Kelly's as well, your wife's. It's a great testament to you. Is this is the child that we raised, and she's over in a foreign country. She's going on whirlwind tours of different places, and going to school and doing great things. And that right there, she's going when she comes home to you, she's going to be changed, and she's going to be grown. And it's just a testament to you as a parent. So my kid is over in Guam right now, your first
yeah,
duty assignment.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he's in the Air
I,
Force.
I I know he's having a good time.
So it's right there, our kids are doing these things, and we things that we have experienced, they're experiencing, and they're better than what we were, you know
Oh yes,
uh
yes.
because they're doing things, they're on their own, and they're doing these things. And so what are your future plans?
Well, I've taken some time off. I was in community mental health for a long time, so I've been taking some time off to recharge. Uh, Spent pretty much her whole senior year helping her prep to get into a top tier one school, so that took up an enormous amount of time. So in the spring, I'm looking forward to opening up private practice. Um, Not really interested in doing research or setting the world on fire with a new psychological theory. I'm most interested in helping the everyday guy or girl get through their life. Sometimes it's just, there's nothing really specific. There's no trauma or anything. Their batteries are spent and they need a recharge.
Which
So
brings
that's
me
the kind of,
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, that's the kind of practice I want to have, just to help the everyday, because I was the everyday guy that just ran out of battery and needed a recharge with someone to do that. And I'm hoping I'm the type of person that can do that for these people.
Be the charger for
Need the
those
charge. Yes. Yes.
someone
That
charged
is
you, now you're paying it forward. So
exactly.
so that's what you're going to be doing in the spring. So you'll be opening up a private practice, and I think that's great. I think that's a testament to your mettle, what you've gone through, and the fact that you're going to do this now, and you've been there. And I think I know you're going to be doing some really great things. So veterans in crisis, what can they do? What can people do? Not just veterans, but what can people do to seek help? Uh, they're in
Yeah.
crisis mode.
So right off the bat, Vermont has just joined the National Crisis Hotline. So there's one single number. It's 988. Anybody across the country can call this number, and it goes to a switchboard, and the switchboard will divert that call to a local crisis center in your state. So if and that's attached to the phone number. So let's say you're someone that is on vacation in Idaho and you're having a tough time, you're having a collapse. If you call from Idaho and your cell phone is Vermont, you'll get transferred back to a Vermont crisis operator, and they can talk to you, get you through it, hook you up with resources when you get back to Vermont, and even direct you to a place in Idaho if you're having an emergency. For veterans, if you call 988, they'll ask you to press one. and that will divert you to the Veterans Crisis Hotline, and you'll be connected with a VA counselor that can help direct you to a multitude of services in every state. So it's
Fantastic.
988 and press 1.
Outstanding.
The other thing they can do is go to the veteranscrisisline.net. That's got a multitude of services, and it talks about all the different services that are available to veterans, housing, finances, anything like that. I absolutely acknowledge that some people have not had a great experience with the VA. I hear that and I understand that. I would encourage you to call anyway and give it a try. It may not work on the first try or the second, but keep calling and you can eventually get connected with the type of service you need. So if you've had one or two bad experiences with the VA, I encourage you to keep trying and keep reaching out because they are there to work for you.
All right.
Another big thing that I always hope for is if people have a battle buddy, just somebody they were stationed with or somebody that you had a good connection with, that it's 2 a.m. and you're thinking, okay, this is that you can call, and the guy will either, or girl will either stay on the phone with you or say, hang on, I'm getting in my car, I'll be there in 3 hours, or what have you. Find that battle buddy. And a lot of times that might be your buddy, if it's bad enough, will help you get these other services or just talk to you. A lot of times all this stuff is just a phone call away.
Yeah.
So I really encourage having these deep, intimate relationships with people you were stationed with and stay in touch with them. So I know that, you know, that if you were to call me, I would be on a plane within 30 minutes and I would be in Oklahoma. There are people who would be, come to Vermont at the drop of a hat. So having those resources, both on a organizational level and an interpersonal level, are very, very, very important.
Well, we're almost out of time, Eric, and I really appreciate you sharing those resources and parts of your life and things that you've gone through. But I do want to say I did bring to put in front of the camera something that you're going to remember.
Yes, Tinker 54.
Yeah. So a long time ago, we had our own little saying. Did you say it for me?
Punch it for Icky.
Yeah. So we made T-shirts, and this T-shirt is like almost 25 years old, and we were one of the most feared and hated groups and loved groups, and Tinker 54 people bought our shirts. So anyway, we're out of time, so I really appreciate Eric coming on and talking. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and let this be your last battlefield. Thank you very much.
Thanks.